The starting point for any scrapbook page for me is faith. Faith that if I begin moving my photos around on the canvas, the story and the design will emerge. Watch me make Reunited and see where my faith took me on this day. See my starts and misstarts, see my movement forward and the final result. Along the way, learn about layout design and figure out what story you want to record from your own life. Hey, Debbie Hodge here from GetItScrap.com. I've been thinking a lot about style lately, about what are the elements of a scrapbooking style and how they play out in my process of scrapbooking, because I want to help students at Get It Scrapped understand better not just what style is so that you can say what your style is, but what your style is so that you can use it to create more efficiently and to take your scrapbook pages new places if you're interested in artistic growth. In this specific video right here, I'm going to give you a time-lapse look at the making of a page, one of my pages. I made it really fast, really quickly last night from about 11 to midnight. Making a page in an hour used to be a rarity for me, but lately, I've been thinking about style as I've been preparing the materials for this class, and I've been thinking about how embracing my style and saying, okay, this is what really works for me, instead of saying, oh, how can I do this new? How can I be someone else? How can I be me, and how can I be me even better than me has been in the past? So it's been a combination of thinking about that, and there's Calvin Ball going on over in the Get It Scrap forums. That's a competition, sort of against yourself, sort of against others, for those of us who actually really do want to be caught up. We really do want tons and tons of photos put on the page with their stories. So I've been doing some speed scrapping lately, and I've been thinking about how embracing my style, immediately knowing what colors do I like for what situations, what motifs am I drawn to, how do I play with scale, what are the best ways for me to arrange things on the page successfully. Understanding all that and really working with it and embracing it has given me faster page making skills. And I also really like my pages, and I've done some cool new things. So I also think when you know what your style is and what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and when you embrace it and you use the right techniques to take those new places, and the class is full of those tips and ideas for pushing your style, not just using it to be efficient, but also using it to go new places. You can just make pages that you love, and you can make a whole bunch of them. So in this video right now, I'm going to do a time lapse of me creating a page, so you'll see me making it real fast, and I'm going to voice over, and as I do it, I'm going to point out the things I do that are how they connect to style. That, you know, the photos that I choose and the way I approach journaling and titling have to do with my story style. The order that I put things on the page have to do with my process style. I've also got aesthetic preferences. I've got my masters and frustrations. I'm going to point out all these parts of a style and how quickly in this hour I pulled on my style to pull this page together. So what I just want you to take away from this is what the aspects of a scrapbooking style are, and how an example of a scrapbooker, me, recalling my style, using that as a touch point, how I was able to quickly make a page that tells a story that I treasure. All right, let's start with story. My story style is often to tell small stories with not so great photos from around the house that have a lot of context in them. I recently cleaned my basement because we're going to have our kitchen redone. Our basement has been a huge mess. We have kept so many of our kids' toys too, but they haven't been able to get to any of them. So I spent last weekend 19 hours over the course of 2 days just in that basement cleaning things up. And by the end of it, there was a large clean area to walk across and for the boiler guys to work in. And there's a corner that my husband had started to make cozy in the back, and I got it even a little cozier. But more importantly for my son is I got all the toys organized. And one of the things that he discovered was there were 4 different huge Connect sets, and they're all there, and their books are there. And Isaac came home from school on Monday, and he said, I'm going to the basement. All I've been thinking about all day long is going to the basement into that cozy little area and building a Connects model. So I wanted to tell that story, and so a couple nights into the week, I went down while Isaac was down there working, and I got some photos, and I made sure I got some photos that really showed the big span of the basement, because I wanted to show what the basement looks like right now, because I have this little secret dream that we're going to get our basement redone. My husband's not as fond of the dream as I am, but So I wanted to show that the whole expanse of the basement, and then I wanted to show the details of Isaac working. So I chose 3 photos that show the different area, and my first step in my process. So my story style is to tell these stories that I use context in photos plus words to record a certain time in our life. And so I chose the photos knowing my story style. And then part of my process is always I edit every photo pretty much with Rad Labs. And one of the things I do often is just to lighten things up. So I opened the photos and I used Rad Lab to lighten things up so that details would show. The next step for me, my process style, is to allocate real estate. In other words, to decide where I'm going to put things on the page. And I start with the photos. And so what I decided to do was go take a look at the last 20 pages that I've made and see what are typical ways that I put things on the page. In other words, what's my approach to allocating real estate? What kinds of compositions do I like? And as I looked through these layouts, I started to see some real commonalities in design. And so I'm just dragging them around in my file viewer, which is AC/DC. But I just started dragging them around to put the ones next to each other that are similar. When I looked at the common designs that I have here, one thing I do a lot is to split the canvas in half, either vertically or horizontally, as you can see in these pages right here. And sometimes I even split the canvas one way in the back. Here, Greet the New Year, it's split horizontally in the back, but then the elements are layered vertically over it on top. The band is another foundation I like to use a lot. A block, sort of close to a square, is a composition that I use where I arrange everything within that block. I often will also use a rectangular block that approximates an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, so it's as if I have a canvas within a canvas. And that canvas within is closer to an 8.5 by 11, but it sits on a square canvas. Another composition that I use a lot is to have a tighter, smaller cluster. It's usually a landscape-oriented rectangle. I decided to go with a band composition for this one. It could have gone block, but to get started, I'm just thinking that I will arrange things in a band going across the page. And it occurred to me as I worked on this that probably part of the reason when I thought about the foundations that I liked, there was the band, the block, the dividing the page in half, the smaller cluster. All my foundations always have a block foundation or a foundation of papers, and they give me an opportunity to layer pattern papers, which is one of my favorite parts of scrapbooking, is finding and using pattern papers. So I cropped my photos down and arranged them in a band across the page. Part of my process style is to think about real estate allocation, to think about how much room I'm going to need for things. I don't always write the journaling after I sort of lay out the photos, but I do think about how much room my journaling is going to need. And I think about title and how much room title is going to need. If it's just going to be a few lines of journaling, then I just really concentrate on layering on the papers, the embellishments, the photos, and I tuck the journaling in on a journaling card or some strips where I can. In this situation, I knew that the journaling was going to be quite lengthy, so I wrote that up first so I would know how much space I had to provide for it. The other great thing about writing your journaling ahead of time is it can really help you come up with a title. I was writing about how happy Isaac was to be reunited with his old toys, so Reunited ended up being a good title choice for me. So typed up my journaling, and look how much space that is. Now I need to figure out how to get it onto the canvas. Seeing this, I realized that a band foundation probably wasn't a good idea. And that's because, well, I probably could do a vertical band, and that is kind of what I'm going to move to. A horizontal band's not going to work because with this journaling, I don't like to have really long lines of journaling. And I could do columns, but I don't like the look of columns because then it feels newspapery to me, and my style is not that. My style is to look like a scrapbook page. Even though I do digital pages, I like them to look like a scrapbook page, so I wanted it in a column. So now I'm going to go back to one of my other favorite foundations, which is to split the canvas into either vertically or horizontally, and I'm going to split the canvas vertically. So I'll have 2 columns, and one column can hold my journaling, and one column can hold the photos. At first, I tried putting the photos on the right side, but the way that things were oriented, the way that my son was angled, just wasn't working for me. And I didn't mention this earlier, but another part of my style when it comes to thinking about design principles and flow an emphasis is I often do have a focal point photo. It may not be a real eye-catching high quality photo, but I will emphasize it with size and matting. So I do have that one photo that's him working and it shows a lot of the room. That's my focal point photo. So the way that's oriented, I wanted that pointed in toward my journaling. So that's why I put it on that side. Part of my story style is that the story I tell gets told with photos and journaling and title. And so another part of my style is that I really work to make sure everything has room on the page, usually before I add in all the pretties. So in other words, I like to make sure there's room for everything. So the next step for me was to render that title, which is Reunited. And I went to find some alphas. Another part of my style is that I like to work with new product, and anything new that I've got I keep in a new bin, and I always look there first. I'll pull from my old stash too, but I always go look in the new bin and see what I've got. So I got some alphas by Kay Winiecki, poster it, and I rendered my title Reunited, and I'm going to put it right up here above the journaling. You know, I could get fancy, and sometimes I like to, but right now, this page I was trying to make quickly, and I know that something that works really well for me when it comes to rendering titles is to combine them with the journaling and to have them about the same width as the block they're near. In other words, to have alignments. So to just put everything tidily on there. So my process style is to now start blocking things out with patterned papers, different papers that make my photos pop, but that also please me. And I pick the papers based upon my aesthetic preferences, my style, the things I like looking at. There's certain colors. In one of the Get It Scrapped webinars, our member Karen, said that my color story is a story of oranges, greens, and reds and yellows. And it turns out it is. Even on this page, I turn to those colors. So I look through, again, another part of my style is when it comes to product, I like to buy product every week, and I like to pull from my new product as I begin, and then I finish things off with older product that might support my theme, or maybe just be finishing fastening pieces that aren't new and real specific. So I'm going to just start looking through my stash, and I'm going to block out in this composition that I use a lot, dividing the canvas in two parts. And then I'm just going to fill in. Another thing I often do is wherever there's just sort of empty spots, I fill in with snips of paper. With all of my pieces put on the page, all of my real estate allocated, papers chosen, foundations laid, the finishing part for me now is to add embellishments. And I look for things that just that support my story, make me happy, and also that create flow around the page by standing out in certain spots. For this page, it's about my son and his toys, and so I went to product. I looked at kits that had to do with playtime and toys and childhood. And I actually think I probably put more on here than I usually would, because I just found cute things and I was trying to go quickly and not overthink things and just make it all happen. So I'm adding all these, and then I also added a mat right behind my photo at the top because I wanted to emphasize that bit more. That was my focal point photo, and I also just wanted a hit of color up there to help flow throughout the page. The final steps now for me are to add some fasteners and just some final bits. I had framed the photo with a circle of string, so I stitched that down. And I also just wanted to add a little bit of blue up here at the top because I pay a little bit of attention to design principles and to repetitions and flow, and I felt like I needed either some red or some blue right up here at the top. So I added the blue cross stitch and then just one red stitch for that finishing part. This is an example of making a page quite quickly, and well, I'm really happy with how it turned out by turning to what you like and what you do well and what you know works. I've used a composition that I know works for me, dividing the canvas in two. I've used a focal point by emphasizing it with matting and separation, which I often do. I've gotten flow with a visual triangle of blues around the page. I've just turned again and again to the things that I know work for me and that I like, and I got my page made well. And it looks really different because I think actually I didn't overthink it. And I went a little wild with the embellishments, which I wouldn't usually do, but I think it makes a really great just shelf at the bottom of the page of a mix of modern and retro elements. So trust your style, rely on your style, and go make some great pages. And remember, if you want any help or support with any kind of scrapbooking, come on over to getitscrapped.com.